I'd like to welcome you to the Ennerdale Valley in the Western English Lake District. Formed by the last ice age, the valley and its enclosing mountains are one of the last remaining wilderness environments in England. So how has it come to pass that the UK's search for a geological disposal facility for nuclear waste has become centred on this beautiful valley? It's because the Ennerdale granite has been identified as one of the 3 potentially suitable rock volumes by the government-backed process managing radioactive waste safely. One of the others is in the adjoining valley of Ennerdale. Local councils have expressed an interest in hosting a nuclear waste repository and are now deciding whether to continue further with the search. However, the vast majority of the area in question is actually within the Lake District National Park. Yes, England's Lake District National Park and Premier National Park, loved by and visited 16 million people per annum. West Cumbria's nuclear industry and the Lake District have existed side by side for 50 years or so. Harmony doesn't perhaps best describe the relationship, but there has been a fragile balance. However, such balance has relied upon the nuclear industry remaining outside the Lake District National Park. This balance is now threatened by a nuclear waste repository actually within the national park. Historically, when the UK previously looked for a nuclear waste repository, all environmentally sensitive areas were excluded at an early stage, and that included national parks. The Ennerdale Valley is unique in England. It's England's wildest place and also one of the most beautiful valleys in the Lake District National Park. Its lake is a site of special scientific interest and contains Arctic char, relics of the last ice age. The River Ian, which flows out of the lake, is a special area of conservation because of its Atlantic salmon and also because of its freshwater pearl mussel populations. Atlantic salmon are wanderers of the northern oceans, returning from the dark sway of the sea to spawn in the rivers of their birth. Freshwater pearl mussels, as juveniles, spend the first 6 months of their life cycle living in the gills of also juvenile salmon. Freshwater pearl mussels need host salmon, but they also need clean and pure water. The River Ian contains England's last surviving breeding population of freshwater pearl mussels, and they are there solely because of the fact that the river contains England's purest and cleanest water, and there they live side by side with Atlantic salmon in a pristine environment. The River Ian is a SAC, Special Area of Conservation, which is the highest level of protection available under EU law. SACs can't be damaged unless there's an overriding public interest, and only then if there are no alternative sites. Sites of special scientific interest are policed by Natural England, SSIs they're known as, and it's virtually impossible to do anything on a SSI without Natural England consent. Ennerdale Fell itself is also owned by the National Trust, which owns 25% of the entire Lake District. The National Trust is one of the wild Ennerdale partners, together with the Forestry Commission, United Utilities and Natural England. The Lake District National Park itself has very restricted statutory purposes, essentially orientated towards protecting the unique environment and its wildlife. Any decision taken by a local authority which affects the national park has to have regard to these statutory purposes. It's very hard to see how anybody could say that industrial development of this valley is in line and in accordance with such statutory purposes. And of course, reverting to geological considerations, it's also very hard to see how anybody could argue that purely on geological grounds that anywhere in Cumbria would be an appropriate site for a geological repository.
The Ennerdale granite covers an area of just over 50 square kilometres. It runs as far north as the shore of Buttermere and as far south as Nether Wasdale. We know that both the northern and southern ends are layered with other rock types and therefore unsuitable. The middle section, including Ennerdale Fell, is the likely target, although it too is likely to be layered. So, how could this area be investigated? It has been suggested this area could be explored without drilling or any intrusive investigation from the surface. This is simply not true. It's not possible to build a sufficiently detailed picture of the subsurface without a seismic survey and drilling boreholes. This would involve large-scale industrial development in Ennerdale. Roads would have to be constructed onto Ennerdale Fell, large enough for the heavy plant needed to carry the drilling rigs. Each rig takes between 10 and 20 lorry loads to transport. To carry out a three-dimensional seismic survey over 25 square kilometres of the granite would require around 60,000 holes 1 metre deep. Each hole will be charged with 200 grams of dynamite. The public would have to be excluded from the area during this work. This is stage 5 of the process, which is expected to last for around 10 years. At the eastern end of Ennerdale Water, Gillerthwaite is the only suitable location for the drilling headquarters, as this should be sited on the valley floor in a sheltered location. The other advantage of Gillerthwaite is it allows less depth of drilling, since the fell is 500 metres higher. It is expected that this industrial site would occupy around half a square kilometre. As a means of reducing the number of drill sites, inclined drilling could be used. It would still be necessary to drill from a large number of locations. These boreholes will be drilled down between 1 and 2 kilometres through the granite. If this proceeds to stage 6, construction of the repository, around 18 million tonnes of excavation spoil would be removed. This is largely granite and has commercial value for road building. If this was extracted via Gillerthwaite, it would take one loaded 8-wheel tipper truck leaving and one arriving every 4 minutes during working hours for the next 30 years. It is possible that the spoil could be removed from the tunnels directly to Sellafield or Longlands Farm at Gosforth, but given the vast quantity of spoil to be removed, it seems unlikely this would happen through the waste emplacement tunnels. Any industrial development on this scale would inevitably have a detrimental effect on Ennerdale and on the national park.
The threat to Ennerdale and the Lake District National Park is both real and apparent. The majority of the area under consideration is within the national park. And of course, our politicians could protect the national park entirely if they decide in January not to go into stage 4 of the process, or alternatively go into stage 4 but exclude the Lake District National Park. In our view, the national park, its people and its visitors deserve better than to become the UK's nuclear refuse bin. If you agree with us, your councillors, both county and borough, need to know. You also need to voice your concerns to the National Trust and the Lake District National Park Authority, the Forestry Commission and your Member of Parliament. Contact details and further information, together with full links to the relevant bodies, can be found on our website www.noend.org.uk, also on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you.